Hey everyone, Bradley Stalder here, BestBell Fantasy, and I want to talk a little bit about James Conner. So James Conner right now is the running back 12 in fantasy points per game. He is the consensus running back 22 right now. And how can we move away from starting James Conner? It's impossible for us to see James Conner not delivering. I mean, last week he was supposed to face off one of the toughest defenses, right, in the Dallas Cowboys. And James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals, that's right, our pathetic, lowly Arizona Cardinals, was able to put up a respectable game. Conner last week, 14 for 98 and a touchdown. He also had 2 targets, 2 receptions, 18 yards, 1.6 yards per route run. That's respectable. He's also averaging 5.2 yards per attempt on the season. Conner is giving us the bag. And this is why, yet again, zero running back was the play in the offseason. James Conner was always mispriced, given that no other running back was going to be coming on the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals didn't address it in free agency. I thought maybe they would sign someone like Ezekiel Elliott. The Cardinals did not address it in the draft. And we have not seen the emergence of a Keontae Ingram. Corey Clement had been there for a minute. There were some other undrafted free agent running backs that were very interesting. But James Conner is going to be the play moving forward. We've seen in the past Conner have 12 and 15 rushing touchdowns on the season. Right now he has 2 through 3 games. And we don't expect that Conner will be able to hold up this efficiency. I mean, his career high is 4.5 yards per carry. His career average is 4.2. This year, he's playing really well, almost 90 rushing yards per game. He's had 2 over 98. And even in week 1, 14 for 62 is respectable. His yards after contact per attempt, 3.16 on the season. He's played very, very well, making guys miss. He has 14 missed tackles on the season. He has 8 runs. 8 of his 51 rushes are for 10 or more yards. That's 16%. 16% of his rushes are going for more than 10 yards. He's playing very well. He looks healthy. He looks good. You're finding ways to get James Conner into your lineup as a high-end running back 2 with low-end running back 1 upside this week. There's good and bad about Hollywood Brown. Here's the good news. The good news is that he's earned 22 targets over the course of 3 games, so over 7 targets per game. We know that he is a target monster. The bad news, well, there's 2 pieces of bad news. One is that he's not exceeded 61 receiving yards in any game so far, despite having 2 games of 7 or more targets. The other bad news is that he's questionable going into week number 4. So what we could get from him is even more of a wide range of outcomes. We think that there's a capped ceiling going into week 4, given the injury, but he's playing full snaps, full complement of snaps, 34, 33, 32% of snaps. It would be better if he was running just a few more routes. Only 87% of his snaps is he running a route, but we're not going to poo-poo Marquise Hollywood Brown. I don't know if this week is going to be a spike week for him. Right now, Hollywood Brown is wide receiver 25 in fantasy points per game. He's gotten a lot of garbage time fantasy points. He's wide receiver 39 in consensus and 38 in projected points. So he's a low-end wide receiver 3 with questions around him. You may want to consider pivoting to someone else, like a Zay Flowers, for instance, who might be a better option if Marquise Brown is even more questionable as we get closer to finding out his status for week number 4. If Hollywood Brown goes out, Michael Wilson will step up. And right now, Michael Wilson is averaging almost 8 fantasy points per game, even with Hollywood Brown in the lineup. So I think Michael Wilson would take a step forward. Probably Trey McBride would also take a step forward. Rondell Moore, who's averaging nearly 9 fantasy points per game on the season, he would take a step forward. So we would expect other pieces to be more involved, maybe Zach Ertz as well. could take those steps. So Hollywood Brown, we're monitoring the situation. He's probably going to play from what I'm hearing. However, we are monitoring whether Hollywood Brown is there. I'm looking to pivot off of him at that back end wide receiver 3, even if he plays. He could have a good game. Certainly, we've seen him bounce back from ankle injuries and other soft tissue issues before, but he's not a player that on a bad offense, with Josh Dobbs as quarterback. I mean, Josh Dobbs, 14 fantasy points per game on the season, quarterback 16. I mean, he's outperforming expectations, but he still hasn't been great. So Hollywood Brown is not someone that I'm looking to be starting for week number 4. So you're probably wondering, should I be starting Zach Ertz for fantasy in week number 4? I mean, Ertz, 20 targets, 14 receptions so far. But here's the problem. Zach Ertz has not been playing well in his return from the ACL injury. He did earn 18 targets through the first 2 weeks. Problem is, he did not play full complement of snaps in week 3. And only 2 receptions, 2 targets, 6 total yards. He has 20 targets, 83 total yards. You'd expect a player with that many targets to be playing a lot better. Only a 52 receiving grade, PFF receiving grade, only 19 pass snaps in week number 3. We should be concerned about Zach Ertz moving forward into week number 4. I think that the targets to start the season were just easy outlets for Josh Dobbs as he was getting used to the offense. We could see if Hollywood Brown is full go, he could get some more targets. Michael Wilson, more targets. Trey McBride has played admirably in his limited snaps behind Zach Ertz. For instance, Ertz has played 81 pass snaps on the season and a 52 receiving grade. Trey McBride has played half. He's played 40 pass snaps, but a 77.5 PFF receiving grade. McBride has 57 yards on only 5 targets compared to Ertz, who has 83 yards on 20 targets. McBride is the much better player at this point. It's only a matter of time before Trey McBride is overtaking Zach Ertz. And I mean, we still didn't see Trey McBride do much in week 3, despite Zach Ertz, taking a step back in terms of snaps. So we're going to be monitoring this situation. But for right now, you are not going to play Zach Ertz in week number 4. There's not a good reason to. Ertz isn't playing well. We have volume concerns. We have snap concerns. We have efficiency concerns. Zach Ertz is a must sit for week number 4. Finally, in week number 3, we saw Rondale Moore be more involved in the game planning. In week number 3 against Dallas, 6 targets, 4 receptions, still only 8 yards is the problem. He's so close to the line of scrimmage. His average depth of target on the season is 3.5 yards. That's not going to get it done. And we really haven't seen Rondale Moore elevate his snaps. He hasn't exceeded 27 in any game. The last 2 games, weeks 2 and 3, only 22 pass snaps. And his PFF receiving grade is 56. That's really bad. So while we are encouraged by Rondale Moore getting involved, the underlying efficiency metrics and snap usage is concerning. Now, we also saw 3 rushing attempts as well from Rondale Moore in week number 3. So he's going to get 5 to 10 touches in a game. I think that's going to be pretty safe, but he's still just a role player and a gadget player, a part-time player. Rondale Moore is wide receiver 53 in fantasy points per game. And right now he's wide receiver 62 in projected points. So I'm not looking to roll Rondale Moore out in my starting lineup. He's not a deep flex consideration. He's not someone that I'm going out and saying, you know what, I want to take a dart throw on Rondale Moore. Even if he spikes and has one big play, it's probably not worth it compared to other players, like a KJ Osborne, who is playing majority of snaps and can get some big plays, but also a little bit of volume. So I would consider, for instance, KJ Osborne over Rondale Moore, not only in week 4, but moving forward until we see something else from Rondale Moore. Trey McBride might not be a must start yet, but he's trending that way. The efficiency metrics are there for Trey McBride with tight ends who have at least 5 targets on the season. Trey McBride is tight end 4 in terms of PFF receiving grade, 77.5. He has over 11 yards per target. He's downfield threat. He's played really well. Problem is that he only has 40 pass snaps and 31 routes that he's played in the season so far. So he doesn't have high usage. But if Zach Ertz continues to trend down and McBride continues to keep his efficiency and maybe work his way up into a few more snaps, that would be very valuable for fantasy. We saw last year, Trey McBride, when Zach Ertz was out, have a couple weeks where he had 6, 5, 10 targets. And we saw, and especially week 17, Trey McBride, 7 for 78 and a touchdown, 10 targets. So if Hollywood Brown is out for this game, maybe we could see Trey McBride get a little bit more usage paired with Zach Ertz. So we want to be buying into, if you are in a deep league and you need some tight end depth right now, pick up Trey McBride as a stash and a future start consideration in week 6, week 7, week 8. You want, especially in those deep tight end leagues where you need someone who's going to be involved in high efficiency. Trey McBride profiles as that guy, former second round pick just last year. So we want McBride on our teams, but we're not confident starting him yet. There's not really reason to. Zach Ertz is still the guy. Even last week when Ertz, took a significant downturn in snaps, Trey McBride did not see a significant spike in those snaps. So we didn't see the Cardinals were just not using the tight end as much. So consider Trey McBride as a long-term stash. But short-term, we just simply cannot play him right now. Should you start Tyler Algier in week number 4? Well, I mean, the answer is probably no. You probably have better options, but we're encouraged that Algier is getting a higher percentage of snaps and carries than we expected when we were drafting him in round 12, round 13, round 14, over fantasy drafts over the summer. In fact, in weeks 1 and 2, 15 and 16 carries for Tyler Algier. Yes, his efficiency, his rush grade is not as high as it was last year, but 3.2 yards after contact per attempt and 9 missed tackles forced on only 38 attempts. That's pretty good. And 4 of his carries, nearly 10%, over 10% of his carries go for more than 10 yards. So this is a player that, of course, is just a handcuff for right now. We'll probably see him get 10 to 12 carries every game, sometimes 16, sometimes like in week number 3 against Detroit when the Falcons were down big. Bijan Robinson was more involved. But Tyler Algier is going to consistently get between 7 and 15 carries and probably going to end up closer to 10 to 12. But that's what I would anticipate moving forward. And if it's 4 yards a carry, 4.4 yards a carry, it's probably not startable for you unless he does fall in the end zone like he did in week 1 against Carolina. He did so twice. But also Bijan Robinson, is clearly the running back 1 in this offense. So there's not really a reason for us to be trotting out Tyler Algier unless we are super desperate and we just need someone with a pulse. At least Tyler Algier has a pulse this year. And it's clear that Atlanta still wants to continue to involve him in the rush game, even though they drafted Bijan Robinson. So I would not consider Tyler Algier a start for this week. Let's not get carried away. Algier is a desperation low-end flex if you really, really need. There's really not a reason to be starting Drake London in any of your fantasy leagues. He is a boom, but probably bust wide receiver who's averaging 5 targets per game. This was the former 8th overall pick back in 2022. 8th overall, first wide receiver off the board. And so what's frustrating is that last year we saw him play well, an 85 receiving grade last year, his rookie year. Now we flash forward to 2023, and it's a 63 PFF receiving grade, right? His yards per route run 1.03. Drake London just running wind sprints out there, people. Like, he's not, you don't get fantasy points for running routes, and he's not been playing well either. Now, Desmond Ridder has not been playing well. Like, that's where the majority of the blame can go. But Drake London has also not played very well, despite the really great rookie year that he put up. I mean, 860 yards, 72 receptions, 114 targets. But 5 targets per game is not going to get it done. He has had 8 and 6 over the last 2 games. But with Desmond Ridder completing like 50% of his passes, Drake London has only caught 8 of his 15 targets. How can you start him with confidence? Like, London has the athletic profile to boom, but the situation and circumstances are so dire that is it worth it? You can put him in as a contrarian play, but that's the only real reason why we're putting in Drake London into our fantasy lineups, is there might not be someone with a better pulse than him. You're probably not going to have someone with more than 5 targets. If you want a 5-target guy, 6-target guy who's going to catch 2 or 3 or 4 passes in the game, like, sure, big play waiting to happen, maybe, but he's not a player that we can have confidence with, moving forward. His best game so far, 6 for 67 and a touchdown. Like, that's okay. That's okay. That's flex worthy stuff. That's 17, 18 points in full PPR. That's probably low end, mid pack wide receiver too. But if that's the ceiling for Drake London, especially with how Desmond Ridder has struggled, I don't know how much I want that. So let's be wary of Drake London. He's a player that I have ranked outside of my top 30 for wide receivers. He's wide receiver 57 this season in terms of fantasy points per game. And yeah, he's outside my top 36 of wide receivers going into week number 4. How can we have confidence in Kyle Pitts either? Pitts hasn't exceeded 44 receiving yards in any game. It took him 9 targets and 5 receptions in week number 3 against Detroit to get 41 yards. Pitts has only 3 career touchdowns. He had 2 last year. He had 1 the year before. Given the circumstances, how can we be confident in Kyle Pitts exploding, other than the narrative of, across the sea in the games that Kyle Pitts has played, not in the United States, he's played very well. Like, if you want to buy into that narrative and you want to take a shot on Kyle Pitts as a contrarian tight end, sure, be my guest. But Pitts is playing, 37 and 43 snaps and running 94% of his routes of the snaps he's playing. That's pretty good. So how can we move away from Kyle Pitts? It's very hard, but at the same time, you drafted him to be your starter. So it's frustrating because you have to be rolling him out there because of the potential that is just laying there, that's just hanging out there. But Kyle Pitts is a sit consideration if you have someone better. If you were able to pick up Hunter Henry or Sam Laporta, hopefully you started Sam Laporta already over Kyle Pitts. Like, those are players who deserve to be ahead of Kyle Pitts in consistent rankings. Now, if you are down bad, if you're down by 10, 15 points and you need the highest potential guy to be in your lineup, Kyle Pitts is there. Like, you can't argue with 9 targets from your tight end. You can't argue with him playing 43 pass snaps in week number 3 and then running 42 routes. Like, you can't be upset with that. But you can be frustrated by his Desmond Ridder being just ineffective to get Kyle Pitts the ball. Pitts hasn't played well either in terms of receiving grade. 64.9 receiving grade is pretty bad. Only 1.03 yards per route run for Kyle Pitts. We're not in for that. That's going to be kind of disastrous. I'm not excited about starting Kyle Pitts, but you might not have better options in week number 4. Death, taxes, and Gus Edwards averages about 5 yards a carry on the season. That's what he's doing right now. Gus Edwards over the last 2 games since the J.K. Dobbins injury, 10 carries, 6.2, and 4.6 yards per carry, 10 and 11 carries in those games. So averaging about 5 yards a carry on the season. And, he's played okay. 2 yards after contact per attempt on the season is not amazing. He does have the touchdown possibility. He had a touchdown against Cincinnati in week number 2. And he looks to be okay moving forward into week number 4. The concussion seems to be past him. But for right now, Gus Edwards is a low-end flex play who can give you 5 or 6 points plus the touchdown possibility. So we're looking at 8 to 9 points if you think that he has a 50% chance of just getting a touchdown. I mean, he has 5 rushes of 10 or more yards out of 30 carries on the season. That's pretty good. 1 out of every 6. We're talking 16, 17% of his rushes are going for 10 or more yards. So he's playing efficiently. He's playing okay. It's just he's not going to get 17, 18 carries. It's clear the Baltimore Ravens want to involve Kenyon Drake. They want to involve Melvin Gordon. And so Gus Edwards plus if Justice Hill is back, we will see if Justice Hill is going to split with Gus Edwards as well. It's worth monitoring going into week number 4. But for right now, Gus Edwards is a low-end flex without any PPR upside. I mean, look at what he's done in the receiving game over the course of his career. Okay. He has no targets on this season. He had 1 total target last year and 21 total targets over the course of 5 seasons. So not a player that offers anything in the way of receiving upside. So Gus Edwards, probably a better half PPR standard league play instead of PPR. You're probably going to get better options on the waiver wire. Look at Gabe Davis being his old self once again. Gabe Davis being a touchdown maker, but not offering a lot of other things. Big play waiting to happen. That's what happened in week number 3. 1 catch, 4 targets, but it was a 25-yard touchdown. That's what got Gabe Davis fantasy points. We're talking 10 and a half fantasy points to salvage your day. But on the season, Gabe Davis is 67 PFF receiving grade. His yards per route run 1.42. That's not going to get it done for us. And we have seen him used around the end zone, 2 touchdowns on the season. And we know he's a 6 to 7 plus touchdown type of guy overall, like season long. But not a player that we're confident going into week 4. It might be a little bit of that's what we know Gabe Davis is, though. He is a big boom, big bust type of wide receiver. And if he ends up getting the 10 points for you like he did last week, it's because he caught a touchdown and salvaged his day. Gabe Davis is not one of those players who is a 6 to 8 target consistent type of guy who you can depend on. He's not a flex play. He's wide receiver 33 on the season in terms of fantasy points per game. And right now I have him outside of my top 36 in wide receiver rankings. So you shouldn't have a lot of confidence in Gabe Davis. He's going to play the full complement of snaps, but not a player that I'm looking to squeeze into my lineup. If I am down by a lot, like if you're losing by a lot, Gabe Davis is that type of upside swing player because all it takes is 1 or 2 plays for Gabe Davis to hit. But he is the definition of boom bust wide receiver for what is turning out to be a more inconsistent Buffalo Bills offense. So far, Davis is paying off his wide receiver 36 or so ADP. But once again, he's better in best ball. He's more difficult in the start sit realm, which is why you're probably going to have more consistent options to fill in your flex than Gabe Davis for week number 4. Let me tell you this. There is no reason for you to be benching James Cook. He is an auto start. James Cook, auto start, running back 1. He is averaging about 15 carries per game. How can you not be starting a 15 carry per game player for the Buffalo Bills? Oh, he's averaging 6 yards per carry. What? Yes, he is an auto start. Play James Cook. I get so many start-sit questions. Should I play James Cook or these other running backs? James Cook, there is no reason for him to not be in your lineup. If you have two awesome running backs, guess what? He's going to be a flex play for you. Or he's going to be a running back 2, or he's going to be a running back 1 if you were able to get James Cook. He is profiling as this league-winning running back you were able to get in round 6, round 7 in most drafts. And this is a player that, we were uncertain of his role based on what he was doing last year, but we loved his efficiency metrics. Remember last year, 5.7 yards per carry and 80.3 PFF rush grade. And his 3.0 yards after contact per attempt, very respectable. We love it. And he's gotten even better this year. 3.8 yards after contact per attempt. And he has 12 targets on the season through 3 games. So 4 targets per game. We love to see that. He is averaging 19 touches per game. What are we doing, people? He's on the Buffalo Bills. He's getting volume, and he's got the efficiency. Play James Cook as a running back 1. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. Unless, look, if you're in a 4-team league and you somehow have Christian McCaffrey and Tony Pollard, only a couple other running backs ahead of James Cook, you want James Cook to be starting for your fantasy team. Make it happen. Let me tell you a player I was wrong about, at least so far through the first 3 games. It's Adam Thielen. Thielen was a player I was profiling as falling off, one of the worst players in terms of efficiency, and it was true. Last year, only 1.06 yards per route run. It was bad. He was playing majority of his snaps out wide, 67% out wide. But what's different this year is Adam Thielen has now moved into the slot. He has played at least 75% of his snaps out of the slot in every single game for the Carolina Panthers. And it doesn't matter if it's Bryce Young. It doesn't matter if it is the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton. Over the last 2 games, Adam Thielen, 9 and 14 targets on the season. Adam Thielen, a 77 PFF receiving grade and 1.6 yards per route run. That's in line with what Thielen did back in 2021, where he went 67 for 726 and had 10 touchdowns on the season. So far, Thielen, 2 touchdowns on the season. We like the start for Adam Thielen, and you should like starting Adam Thielen in your fantasy lineups. The Carolina Panthers face off against the Minnesota Vikings. And who was it last week? Oh, it was Keenan Allen who went off for over 200 receiving yards, 18 receptions, and absolutely torched the Vikings out of the slot. Thielen in the revenge game against the Vikings will torch them out of the slot. Fire up your Adam Thielen as an upside flex play in week number 4. Play him with confidence because the Carolina Panthers are playing Adam Thielen with confidence. The reason I'm bringing up Chuba Hubbard is because Miles Sanders reportedly did not practice. And now we're getting into Saturday, and you need to consider picking up Chuba Hubbard as an upside running back too. Chuba Hubbard this year, an 81 rush grade. His yards after contact per attempt is 5.0. What? Yes, it's only 12 rushes he's had on the season, but he's played very, very well. And this dates back to last season. Last season, 95 carries for Chuba Hubbard, 467 yards, almost 5 yards a carry. He had 2 touchdowns, an 81 rush grade. He again has an 81 rush grade this year. And then in terms of receiving, Chuba Hubbard last year, 1.55 yards per route run. That was great among running backs. 16 targets, 14 receptions. He is reliable out of the backfield to catch the ball. This is a player selected in round 4 of the NFL draft back in 2021. He was a much better college player, except for his final season. Something weird happened, whatever. It dropped his stock. And Chuba Hubbard now has the potential, if Miles Sanders moves if Miles Sanders is out for week number 4, Chuba Hubbard projects as a top 20 running back given the volume, given his efficiency, given his ability to catch the ball. Yes, give me Chuba Hubbard, who can play very well against the Vikings defense that has struggled overall and can sometimes get into shootouts. And we want players like Chuba Hubbard. If they're getting volume, if they're involved in shootout games, we want them. You should also be making sure Chuba Hubbard is picked up off of your waiver wire. And if you're not going to start him, that's fine. Like, I don't mind if you keep him on the bench, but you just don't want your opponent to get this player as well. So Hubbard is definitely worth the pickup. He's definitely worth the waiver add. And he's shown efficiency metric wise that he's both good enough in the passing game and an efficient runner. And he's shown it so far this year. Pick him up. And in some scenarios, you can start Chuba Hubbard. This is a player that, yeah, you can do it if Miles Sanders is out for week number 4. See, DJ Chark is a player that you're probably not going to end up starting, but he's going to get you 7-8 targets, but only come down with 4 catches. Maybe it's 70 yards. Are you going to be happy with a range of 6 to 12 fantasy points? Because that's about what DJ Chark is going to get you. Last week, he went 4 for 86. So once again, 12 fantasy points, but he got the touchdown. So it bumped up to 18. So you saw a spike week from DJ Chark last week. Very nice. 10 targets. And Adam Thielen also feasted out of the slot. So the games that can turn into shootouts, we want pieces of. So DJ Chark is part of this where you're like, oh, I don't like this profile, or I don't like that my receivers are only catching 45% of their passes, or, oh, the receiving grade is so bad because DJ Chark is a 55 receiving grade and his yards per route run is only 1.17. Like, that's not going to get it done for me. Chark is going to get targets, though, and they're going to be downfield targets. And we want like DJ Chark for spike week potential. Like, Chark is a good best ball play. He does have the injury history, so he could be a complete zero if he aggravates something. But if you are down big, consider DJ Chark as an upside flex consideration with a very low floor. So we saw last week 18 fantasy points from DJ Chark, 10 targets. I could see once again a 4 receptions for 70 yards on 7 targets. Okay, and that would be DJ Chark for you. Okay, his yards per reception, he's at 20.2 on the season. We like those types for best ball leagues, but they feel bad if he does not come down with a couple of those. They could really, really hurt your fantasy team. So for consistency, and you want like you want guaranteed 9 points. I don't know if DJ Chark is going to get that for you, but he certainly has the upside to get you 18 to 20 fantasy points in what we project to be a shootout between Carolina and Minnesota. Well, if games get into shootouts, we know what the Bears are going to do. They're going to roll out Roschon Johnson and give him some touches. Roschon had 8 carries and 2 receptions in week number 3's game against Kansas City. It ended up being a blowout, but we've seen blowouts now in 2 games so far against Green Bay and Kansas City. And in those games, 10 and 11 touches for Roschon Johnson. Johnson on the season is averaging 10.2 fantasy points per game. He's at running back 26 on the season. He's projected for 10 fantasy points, which is running back 31 on the week. And for Chicago this week, going off of playing the Denver Broncos, who just gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins. I don't know if Roschon Johnson's going to get the volume, but it may not matter if his efficiency stays where it is. I mean, a 78 PFF rush grade is pretty good. A little over 2 yards after contact per attempt is fine. It's not going to move the needle too badly for us, but 2 missed tackles forced on 17 attempts and 3 rushes of 17 or more yards, or 10 more yards on 17 carries. That's 17% of his carries. That's pretty good. So Roschon Johnson still hasn't taken the next step. He only played 10 snaps in week number 3, but that was almost the same amount combined from weeks 1 and 2. But all of this is in context of are the Chicago Bears going to experience a blowout yet again? Because if they do, Roshan Johnson is the guy. If not, then Khalil Herbert, may take over. And Herbert still hasn't had 10 carries on the season, despite playing more snaps than Roshan Johnson in every single game. An 80 rush grade, 3 yards after contact per attempt for Khalil Herbert. He is still the play over Roshan Johnson, despite the fact that Roshan is trending upward. Herbert, though, still projects as the running back 1 on the Bears, but it's becoming much more of a clean split. I'd say 55-45 in terms of Herbert over Roshan at this point, but it is trending toward Roshan. I'm not sure if it's going to be in week 4, 5, or 6, but at some point in the first half of the season, we're going to see Roshan Johnson take over this backfield. But it may not matter if the Bears are really, really bad. It will matter, though, if the Bears are able to turn it around and manufacture some offense. Justin Fields needs to get on the same page with DJ Moore and company. So Herbert plus Roshan Johnson, I think these are back-end running back 3s at this point, given the struggles that we've seen from the Chicago Bears to stay in games. So let's not get crazy about either of these players, but Roshan Johnson is a back-end running back 3 right now going into week. One of the bigger bust wide receivers who's not dealing with an injury is DJ Moore. Moore right now, 11 fantasy points per game, 37th among wide receivers in points per game. His consensus ranking right now is outside the top 36. He's running back or wide receiver 40 at this point, and it's looking bad for DJ Moore. Like, we were drafting him, I wasn't. Some in the fantasy streets were drafting him as wide receiver 18, wide receiver 20 at the 4 or 5 turn. And that just can't happen, especially given the struggles that we've seen from Justin Fields and Moore to get on the same page. DJ Moore has 14 targets on the season. Cole Kmet has 15. Roshan has 11. Chase Claypool has 12. Right? Darnell Mooney has 8. It's gross. And Moore, yes, he leads the team in PFF receiving grade at 67.9. And he leads the team in receiving yards with 170. And he's tied for the team lead with 1 touchdown. But look at what Moore has done over the first 3 games. 2, 6, and 6 targets. That's not getting it done, averaging less than 5 targets per game, averaging fewer than 60 yards per game. In fact, 2 of his 3 games, 41 or fewer yards. Not going to get it done. And his PFF receiving grade 67.9 is just pathetic. And it's, in fact, if the season ended today, would be a career low among DJ Moore's 6-year career. It's gross. His yards per route run, 1.56, also not going to get it done. It would be his worst season of his career. So we expect better days ahead for DJ Moore. We think that they're going to turn it around eventually. Like we saw Justin Fields last year after 3, 4, 5 games, he did take steps forward and did improve. And we think that that's going to happen again. But it's really hurt fantasy managers. The DJ Moore has not played very well in week numbers 1, 2, and 3. I mean, week 2, he played well against Tampa, 6 for 104, 75 PFF receiving grade, 3 yards per route run. I mean, that's fine, but 2 really dud games makes him, a back-end wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4, until we see consistent play from Moore moving forward. Yes, Chicago plays Denver, right? And Denver's lost a lot of their defensive weapons going into this game. But even so, even with DJ Moore, facing a difficult defense, he's going to probably be a sit in favor of the Tank Dells of the world, the Tutu Atwells of the world, when we're more guaranteed to get fantasy points from those players. Like DJ Moore, we've seen spike weeks. We've seen, a 7 touchdown season from him just coming in 2022. But he's not a player that we should be going out and saying, hey, I need to be getting DJ Moore in my lineup. He's more of, is Tank Dell available? Is Tutu Atwell available? Obviously, Puka Nacua is easily going to start over DJ Moore. Like, those are slam dunk starts. So consider benching DJ Moore, even in what might be a really nice matchup, because we can't trust him. Like, we can't trust him. Tell me why we would trust DJ Moore at this point. Oh, he's going to turn it around. Based on what? Variance? Based on regression to the mean? Well, yeah, Bradley, regression to the mean. There's a reason why he's been performing poorly. Maybe his mean is a little bit lower than you think. I know. Darnell Mooney is not playing well, but I don't know. I didn't expect Darnell Mooney to emerge right away in weeks 1, 2, and 3. He was dealing with a pretty significant leg injury that cost him the last part of the season. So Mooney is not a player that I'm going out of my way to start, but I'm just saying, in your really, really deep leagues, Mooney has a really nice wide receiver cornerback matchup, and I have him projected for a few more points and ranked a little bit higher than the expert consensus. So we're not saying start Darnell Mooney, but would it surprise me if he had a spike week this week against Denver? No, Denver's defense has really struggled against passes, against rushing. And you can even see, like, Robbie Chosen had a big game. Mike White just chucked it up. So if Justin Fields can just chuck it up to Darnell Mooney and connect on one big play, that might salvage Darnell Mooney's season, because right now Mooney is only averaging 5 fantasy points per game as the wide receiver 73. So that's not going to get it done. Mooney is not a must start any stretch of the imagination. But he hasn't played well, but this is an opportunity for him to have, like, his bounce back, better days ahead type of thing. Mooney has only had 1 target over the last 2 games. It's been pretty rough because he once again would set a career low in PFF receiving grade if the season were to end today. His previous career low was 67, and right now he's at 57. So it's not looked great for Darnell Mooney. Maybe something's happened with a setback. He only played 11 snaps in week number 2 and 21 in week number 3. Maybe he's trending upward. This is a possibility, which is why we should consider some Darnell Mooney as, a forgotten sleeper, a player that can have, a spike week. We saw a couple years ago in Chicago in 2021 where Darnell Mooney, 75 PFF receiving grade. He had 4 touchdowns, over 1,000 receiving yards, and a 1.72 yards per route run, a respectable 1.72. And we liked his yards per reception, 13 back in 2021. But dealing with the injury, the low volume, these were all concerns. And if anything, anything from the injury standpoint for Darnell Mooney, hindering him moving forward, that may have cropped back up. But in week number 3, we saw him back up to about half of the snaps. See if he can get a full complement here against Denver, have a spike week. That would be nice. So we'll see if that can come to fruition. If not, I don't think he's a must start, but he is a dart throw consideration for your late flex or deep flex leagues. How can you manage to have T. Higgins on your team and feel any sort of way about it? Like, T. Higgins only has a 38.5% catch rate on the season. 38.5%. Oh man, this is so bad. We need to see T. Higgins consistently produce. We need to see Joe Burrow healthy, because that's what's costing T. Higgins right now. T. Higgins, 55 receiving grade. He had a big game against Baltimore. Baltimore's beaten up though. But against LA last week, 2 for 21, no touchdowns, 8 targets yet again. This is the same thing that we saw in week number 1 when T. Higgins had 0 catches on 7 targets. It's disastrous. It can absolutely crater. It's one of the reasons why I was a little worried about T. Higgins. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, but Bradley, Joe Burrow did look a little bit better last week. Yeah, and still, T. Higgins did not play very well. The average depth of target over the last 2 games for T. Higgins is much, much lower, only 10.3 and 10.8. Whereas we saw in week number 1, Joe Burrow trying to push the ball really deep down the field to T. Higgins and nothing connected. So he changed that up, switched it up, and it's still not working in week number 3. So maybe there are some more adjustments that are happening in week number 4. But for right now, we need to see Joe Burrow get healthy because Burrow is not healthy. It's clear that he's not able to push the ball down the field. He has the 3rd worst NFL passer rating among quarterbacks with who are attempting passes of 20 yards or more. So this is a player who's really struggled to throw the ball deep. We'll see if T. Higgins can have a bounce back week 4, but it's not something that I'm banking on. And he is a sit consideration if you are looking for someone else. I mean, the Titans are also a very difficult matchup. Sean Murphy Bunting has allowed one game of receiving. He's allowed 40 yards or more in only one of the last 12 games. So and he's projected to line up mostly against T. Higgins is this week 4 matchup. The game environment's not right. The over-under is about 41.5. Depends on where you're looking at the sports books. But for right now, T. Higgins is a sit consideration, given the tough matchup, given the bad game conditions, given his inconsistent play, given that we don't know if Joe Burrow is back to being healthy yet. So T. Higgins, there's a lot of reasons for us to be uncertain about him. Certainly, we may not have a better play, and you may be forced to put T. Higgins in your lineup. So be it. And anytime that a player is getting 7, 8, 10, 11 targets, like they could have a boom week. But when we're looking at the ranges of outcomes for T. Higgins, the bust is a lot larger right now. So consider T. Higgins as a low end wide receiver 3 that you can sit for other flex plays.